Hello, and welcome to this session on designing and assessing digital technologies projects for Foundation to Year 2. My name is Sue Carter and I'm a senior educator with Grok Academy. I've been a primary school teacher for 37 years in the Northern Territory in both Darwin and East Arnhem Land. In that time, I've taught all primary levels from Foundation to Year 6, along with being a PE specialist, teacher librarian, technologies teacher, and completing a Masters of Education in Applied Science. Over the past 20 years, I've worked in developing teacher professional learning in ICT and technologies, along with my role as a curriculum consultant for technologies, the arts, health and PE, and more recently STEM. My co-host today is Bianca Willis.
Hi everyone. So I've spent 7 years working as a primary school teacher in rural parts of Queensland and then completed my Masters of Education in Digital Technologies. So I've been at Grok for the last 18 months, and Sue and I are just so excited to share resources and activities to help you teach digital technologies curriculum to your students. This webinar is part 7 of a 7-part series focusing on the changes to the Australian curriculum in relation to digital technologies from version 8.4 to version 9. In particular today, we are going to be discussing how to design and assess a digital technologies project to Foundation through to Year 2 students. In today's webinar, we will be focusing on curriculum and planning, followed by a run-through of an example project. We will talk about assessment before wrapping up our webinar by sharing some resources and also giving you some more information about Grok. The goals for today's session include exploring version 9 of the digital technologies curriculum, the content for your students as they create digital solutions as part of a project. We will provide an example of an integrated project, and we will investigate the assessment options for elements in the achievement standard. Today, we will primarily focus on the curriculum for students in the Year 1-2 band. This is because the corresponding content descriptions for Foundation are not relevant for today's webinar. Version 9 of the Australian curriculum has separated Foundation or Prep from our Year 1-2 band level. Our students in Foundation are expected to show familiarity with digital systems and use them for a purpose. The red text for our Year 1 and 2 achievement standard will be the curriculum focus for our webinar today. This includes that students show how simple digital solutions meet a need for known users. They access and use digital systems for a purpose with assistance. They use basic features of common digital tools to create, locate, and share content as they work collaboratively with their peers.
We have addressed the teaching and learning cycle in previous sessions, but I'd like to revisit it today, as it's an important part of our planning process. What do I teach? That's directly from the curriculum. How will I teach it? That has a focus on the pedagogy and the resources that we're using. And how will I know they have learnt it? That's through our achievement standards. Note that these icons are going to be present throughout our entire presentation. So we need to think about what it is that we're going to be teaching our students. To do this, we need to read through the content descriptions, outline exactly what it is that you need to be teaching. And we'll take a closer look at the content descriptions as we go through this presentation. Then we need to think about how we're going to go about teaching it. This could include integrating with other learning areas and referring to the elaborations for ideas. So consider how you might be able to teach the different aspects of your digital technologies, say through English, maybe with the HAS from history and geography perspectives, through the arts, or even with maths and science. Keep in mind that pedagogical practices that you might use when creating learning for your students and their experiences. And then, of course, we need to check how well our students have learnt it. And this is where we refer to our achievement standards for assessment. It's important to remember to consider both formative and summative assessment opportunities, and we'll be looking at those when we get to the assessment section. Let's take a look at the curriculum to find out what needs to be taught in years 1 and 2. Today, we're looking specifically at the strand of processes and production skills of the digital technologies curriculum. This section contains 6 substrands, and we'll be looking at 5 of those substrands and how they relate to projects. The 6th one, privacy and security, has already been addressed in a previous session. The first is investigating and defining, and this relates to the concept of specification. And we have one content description where students will be investigating simple problems for known users and that they can solve them with digital systems. The next one is generating and designing, and this looks at designing algorithms. Now, in 2 previous sessions, we've looked at algorithms, and so we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this one today. Producing and implementing looks at the programming side of algorithms to create a digital product. And you can see here that at years 1 and 2, there is no content description for this. We move on to evaluating, and that looks at the concept of interactions and impact, where our students can discuss how existing digital systems satisfy the identified needs, and they might be looking at what's next. And throughout a project, our students will be collaborating and managing as they build their project management skills and demonstrate their digital literacy skills. In this section, we have 2 content descriptions that focus on the use of digital tools. We will present these in a linear fashion throughout our session today, but these are happening throughout a project, and you're monitoring your progress as they go. At this point, I'd also like to draw to your attention some curriculum codes that are next to each content description, as it's important for us to develop our curriculum literacy. AC, that refers to Australian curriculum. The number next to that is 9, and that's referring to version 9 of our Australian curriculum. After that, you'll see the letter T, and that's referring to the technologies learning area. And that's followed by DI, and that's the digital technologies subject. We then have the number 2, and for us today, that's our band of years 1 and 2. And then the letter P, and P is referring to the strand of processes and production skills. And then you'll find a number, 01 or 02, 03, 04, 05. These are the order of the content descriptions. Now, we don't have to address them in that order, but that's the order that they're presented in the Australian curriculum. Now, let's take a look at what we need to assess at years 1 and 2. This is the achievement standard, and it's really important to understand at the beginning of your planning process to know what the end point looks like for what you want your students to achieve. We've highlighted in red the action or command verbs, and that's what we're looking at when we're assessing our students' skill development. They include words like follow, describe, show, use, create, access, locate, share, collaborate. And then next to those, you'll see green words highlighted, and this indicates the content of what the students will be using or doing. This includes basic algorithms, digital systems, common digital tools. And it is important to look at this so you know what it is that you're assessing. So let's pause for a moment to look at these action verbs and jot down what the action verb means to you. If you're with a group of teachers, Maybe you can discuss this together and see if you come up with similar or different ideas. It's a good idea to pause at this point and just have a conversation. So how can a student show their learning? In this case, we're looking at, are they able to provide some information? The information might be through speech. They're verbalizing what their understanding is. You might be able to record this. They may be drawing or showing it through text or even through body movement. What does describe look like? This is in reference to algorithms. And what they're doing is providing characteristics, features, and qualities of this given concept in algorithms. So students might try and order steps, putting them in order. They may verbalize what they think will happen from one point to the next point to the next point. They may be able to draw these or even use arrows and text to show how things move along in steps. Accessing and using, we're referring to digital tools here, where we put into action the information that's provided or apply prior learning for a given purpose. So students might be able to take a picture of something using a digital device. They need to upload their data into some sort of spreadsheet or PowerPoint or something on an app, using an app on an iPad. They might even be using a drawing tool to share their understandings. The create, locate and share, again, that's with digital tools. So they're looking at how you might make something, invent something, or develop an artifact that can produce a solution to a problem. And finally, the collaboration, we're looking here at behaviours. So what is their ability to work with others? In teams, in pairs, maybe taking roles, maybe discussing things with professionals when you invite someone into a classroom or go on an excursion, and how they're going to share the load when they're working in a team. Is it one person that's doing all the work, or are they able to all contribute? Over to you, Bianca.
Thank you. Another change with version 9 of the Australian curriculum is a term that's introduced from Year 3, and that is user stories. The Year 3 full band students learn to define problems with given design criteria and by co-creating user stories. This is part of the substrand investigating and defining. Another change is the content description for Year 3-4. Students learn to discuss how existing and student solutions satisfy the design criteria and user stories, and that's part of the evaluating substrand. User stories is not something we're including for our Year 1-2 project idea. However, it is important for you to know where your students will progress to for Year 3 and up. User stories keep the end user in mind, and we see a lot of examples of this as we design more and more things to make things easier for our user, reducing user pain points. Examples have included the progression for television from a dial to using remote controls. Washing dishes by hand, now we have a dishwasher with its own internal heating system. We have apps that detect situations before the user has even realised. For example, the smart car features of our modern cars that will actually apply brakes for you. When students are considering user stories, they're using empathy to answer questions such as, what does the client or the user want the solution to do? What does the user need? We use the following sentence starter to help students identify user needs. So, as a student, I want to receive a message that my plant soil is dry, so I can water my plant. Students in your classroom will be working at different levels, and understanding this next level or step in the curriculum will help you to scaffold and transition your students to the next year band. To support the digital technologies project concept, we're going to look at rich connections that we can make across all learning areas.
So here we'd like to provide some ideas at the foundation to year 2 band that teachers could consider. At years 1 and 2, we want students to become aware of their design thinking by discussing and observing how the needs of different people are met through using digital systems. This is a chance to create meaningful solutions to real-world problems while making connections with science, HASS, health, or even the arts. Ideas can include a unit of work on a new concept of digital technologies. We could begin with something like a picture book, for instance, The Tweeting Galah, or The Sensational Saga of the Bumbling Bilberry. These are books by Kim Maslin. Each story has a series of prompts for classroom discussions, and students could then identify ways of being safe online and draw their own illustrations to create a class story. They might be taking photographs of their drawings and creating a digital book using PowerPoint or Book Creator, which allows the class to then share their story. We might have a unit of work on weather, and this links to the science curriculum content descriptions of making and recording observations of phenomena such as changes to weather, seasonal changes to plants such as colour or dropping of leaves, and the growth of flowers or fruit, and noticing how daily weather indicators and seasonal patterns help us to make plans for activities in our daily lives. Students could record the weather each day, taking photographs to include in a digital story, maybe using PowerPoint or Google Slides. The class could grow their own plants that had fruit or flowers, and they could take daily records of their plant to observe the changes over time. Other ideas include safety and well-being in the health learning area. There's climate, which relates to HASS. There's exploring habitats of animals, which can link to science, or exploring living things and the different ways that animals can be recorded. And then, of course, there are adventure stories that can be built using digital tools, and they can reflect the learning area of English.
We're going to talk about the integrated DT project idea that we have, with the sub-strand of investigating and defining first. The sub-strand of investigating and defining has just one content description at each band level. It's beneficial to look at the progression so that as a teacher you can understand the skills that will be developed by your students. For investigating and defining, our students in year 1-2 are investigating simple problems for known users that can be solved with digital systems. Our year 3-4s move into defining problems with given design criteria and co-creating user stories.
So the focus that we'll have for our session will be in providing ways for students to investigate simple problems for known users and consider what digital systems are available to solve these. It's really important to lay these foundations in years 1 and 2 so that they can move on to what Bianca was describing for the problems in years 3 and 4. Now, taking a look at the elaborations in the investigating and defining substrand, you'll find that there are 4 examples, and you might like to look at internet-based translation tools for First Nations languages. You could look at familiar and easily understood problems with a few complications or steps for them to solve, such as checking the weather using a weather app. And you can look at digital systems that are involved in your school, such as taking the attendance the role or borrowing a library book. Quite often they have a scanner in the library, and this connects to a digital system. Or they might be exploring familiar problems to be solved using a robot, and they could develop their own robot using cardboard boxes and explain how it might be cleaning up the classroom at the end of the day. The thing we want you to note most is what we've highlighted in red, the command verb, investigate. And if you're unsure of some ideas, you could use these as a springboard where you want your students to be investigating, identifying, and exploring. So the way we want to show you today a project that you could develop is beginning with a picture book. This story is called Mutt Dog, and it's written by Stephen Michael King. Now, the story follows a stray dog, and he follows an elderly lady into a shelter, and he meets a kind worker who later gives him a home. And once he's adopted, Mutt Dog, as he's later known as, basks and thrives in his new surroundings. At this point, to become familiar with the story, it's a good idea to pause your video and click on the YouTube link on the screen and watch a teacher who is reading the story and unpacking all the different elements within the story that we're going to be addressing throughout this session. It's also a good idea to look at the amazing illustrations that really give you a sense of the dog and the dog's life. So what do you do with this story? How does this develop into a project? Well, we need to begin by posing a problem. Now, our Mutt Dog, yes, he's brave and he's fast and he's smart, but he is all alone. And at this point, it's where you want your students to start looking at what are his needs? What does a dog need? And then you can start to pose some questions such as, who could help him? What happens when pets are lost? What are ways of finding their owners? And this all aligns with your Year 1 science curriculum, where we're identifying basic needs of plants and animals, in this case of the animal. Things that include air and water and food and shelter. And we describe the places that they live in. So teachers can look at organisations such as the RSPCA or vet clinics and investigate the different digital systems that are used to solve this problem. How are animals reunited with families when they're lost? How are health checks documented?
As students engage in this project, they're working, as Sue said, to identify what an animal needs. So questions such as, why do pets need owners? What do owners do? And the students will work to identify the different things that a pet needs, including shelter, food and water, love and understanding. Pets may also need regular medical checks with the local vet surgery. They need exercise, grooming, and enrichment. Students are answering questions such as, what digital systems are used for our pet? And this is a great area of discussion with your students. The teacher is helping explore different digital systems used for pets. It provides a perfect opportunity to talk about data. So what data is recorded about your pet and also about your family if you are a pet owner? This includes discussions around microchipping. So why would you microchip your animal? And you could talk here about the policy that dogs over 6 months must be microchipped and cats over 4 months must be microchipped. This part of the project focuses on helping students to understand what digital systems exist now to help with this problem. You can also discuss lost and found websites, lost pet registers, Tasmanian's RSPCA. Students can be provided an opportunity to explore what would be a profile of their pet. They could even develop a lost and found poster of a fictitious missing animal. As they continue progressing in this project, they're investigating solving problems with digital systems. This is where you can use helpful videos like we've got here on the screen that explain about microchipping your animal. You can talk about identifying the technology behind microchipping, which is similar to the scanning system used in a library or a supermarket. You can talk about lost and found websites, lost pet registers, and even invite a vet to come and demonstrate how they use the microchip to find the owners of a lost animal.
I've got activity up here on the screen, and this is a chance for you to pause our video and maybe look at the 2 YouTube videos that have been presented to see how this information can be shared with your students. The first one is from the UK, but it still is very good in explaining how they are chipped and checked. And the second one is from the RSPCA from New Zealand. And again, going through the process of when an animal is lost, how they're microchipped, and how they can be reunited with their owners.
Thanks, Sue. So those videos are a really great way to then springboard into questions. So questions that you could use to encourage class discussions include, how does a microchip work? How is the data read? Where is the data stored? How can we find out the owner of an animal that is lost? And it also provides a wonderful opportunity for activities that allow cross-curricular work with literacy. So for example, students can be supported to create their own vet clinic profile of their pet. A great class brainstorming activity includes working out what are the key things we need to include in our pet profile. Students can then develop their digital literacy skills by taking a photo of their completed pet profile and adding it to a whole class file. It could be using PowerPoint or Google Slides. Another class activity can be to ask students to bring in a photo of their own pet and upload those photos to a local directory or shared folder. The students can then create a class digital summary chart of their pets, recording details such as the name of their pet and their gender, and putting that under the photos of the class animals.
You'll also notice at the end of each of our slides here, we're relating to the content description, number 1, which was about investigating simple problems for known users that can be solved with digital systems.
We'll now move on to look at the substrand of generating and designing. This content description begins at the Year 3-4 band, with students generating, communicating, and comparing designs. There is, however, another content description in the generating and designing substrand, which is based on algorithms. So you'll notice for the Year 1s and 2s, it's about follow and describe algorithms involving a sequence of steps, branching, and iteration. For this project, we won't focus too much on algorithms because we have previously covered this content in our earlier webinars, Algorithms 1 and 2, which were weeks 3 and 4 of this webinar series. However, if you did want to include a lesson that covered following and describing algorithms, you could use physical hardware devices such as Bbots or Bluebots and have students create a costume of a pet or even a costume for Mutt Dog. And we will talk more about this shortly.
So the focus in this section is providing ways for students to follow and describe algorithms involving a sequence of steps with branching and iteration. At this level, it's developmental. They start creating only content or representations. And then at the years 3-4, they implement their algorithms using visual programs through coding. So if we take a look at the elaborations that match our content description, we're looking at students that are following short or ordered sequences of steps to make their decisions to solve a simple problem. They are describing those steps and decisions in the correct order where they need to solve a simple problem. They can correct and order a series of mixed up pictures that describe their story. And they've got steps needed to solve a problem and understanding why the order is important. So if they're identifying these things, it might be something as simple as getting dressed. Do we put our shoes on before we put our socks on? Or when we're brushing our teeth? how we need to put the toothpaste on the toothbrush first. They're also identifying decisions that they need to solve their problems and what the next steps are going to be. And then they'll follow those algorithms and repeat those single steps as fixed numbers of time. For example, when they're practicing their spelling, or maybe in their maths, or maybe catching a ball with a partner 10 times. So you can see how these actually fit across the curriculum, and they're not just specific to digital technologies.
So this is a fun activity that you can do as part of this project. So students can be encouraged to create a Bee-Bot costume or jacket for their pet. So perhaps that's a pet rabbit or a cat or a goldfish. They can then create their own 15 by 15 centimetre square, identifying their pet needs. So for example, if they have a pet goldfish, they might like to draw a picture of fish food on one square, a picture of their pet's fish tank on another, and then code the Bee-Bot to move to the food or the shelter. Another option is continuing to use our picture book prompt of Mutt Dog, and students can create a Bee-Bot jacket of Mutt Dog. Using a clear plastic mat with the black grid lines drawn on it, and then a representation of shelter and food and exercise, all the needs of Mutt Dog, they can then code their Bee-Bot to move around the space, getting the needs met. The prompt could be, for example, to move your Mutt Dog bot to do some exercise or get some food or water, to find his bed to sleep or seek affection from his owner. This is another way to meet the needs for your more advanced Year 2 students, and using this as an extension activity.
So now let's take a look at the substrand of producing and implementing. As we mentioned earlier, this is not covered in foundation, nor is it in years 1 and 2. However, we just wanted to bring it to your attention to note that at 3 and 4, they implement simple algorithms as visual programs, including control structures and input. Now, you may find that some of your Year 2 students are a little bit more advanced, and you might like to consider then, can you assist them in being prepared for the Year 3 content descriptions?
We will now take a look at the substrand of evaluating. This substrand has a single content description for each band level. And again, it's really great to look at the progression to understand the skills that are developed for each band level. The progression in evaluating from Year 1, 2 up to Year 3, 4 is the inclusion of design criteria and also user stories, which I mentioned earlier. For students in Years 1 and 2, they are developing skills to discuss how existing digital systems satisfied the identified needs for known users. Our Year 3, 4s are discussing both existing and also student solutions, and they are to satisfy design criteria and user stories.
So as part of this substrand of evaluating, students in Year 1 and 2 are now discussing how existing digital systems satisfy the needs of known users. Taking a look at the elaborations, again, they're suggesting some ideas, such as how to describe familiar digital systems to meet the needs of individuals. Again, we've got those verbs, those action verbs of describing, discussing, sharing, and these again are springboards and prompts for you to think about for what you might like to design for your students in terms of their learning. So for this project, we're evaluating our activities, and that can be exploring what existing digital systems are used to store and access information of our pets. For instance, at the veterinary clinic, they keep profiles on pets, and those records might include x-rays, blood tests, when they've had their vaccinations, when they've been wormed, any injuries, when they've been unwell. And they're things that this is data that they can go back to and refer to for each of the pets' visits to the clinic. They also use scanners to keep their records, and this is where our microchipping comes in again. And other examples with other organisations such as the RSPCA, they also keep records of pet adoptions, of microchipping, and any medical records that the pet has had, both when it's come into the RSPCA and then when it goes out.
We will now talk about the collaborating and managing substrand. It is important to note that although we have presented the substrands in a certain order today, and we are presenting this as the last substrand, this process is certainly not linear. Collaborating and managing is occurring throughout the life cycle of a project. Again, we have just one content description for each band level for collaborating and managing. It is helpful again to look at that progression to understand the skills developed as students move past the Year 1-2 band. Our Year 1 and 2 students use basic features of common digital tools to share content and collaborate, and that's guided by trusted adults. Our Year 3-4 students are using the core features of common digital tools to share content. They're now planning tasks and still collaborating, following agreed behaviours, and this is still supported by trusted adults. By the time students are in Year 5 and 6, they are selecting and using digital tools effectively while planning tasks and collaborating on projects. Our students in Years 1 and 2 use the basic features of common digital tools to share content. The students are also collaborating with demonstrated agreed behaviours, and it's important again to remember, guided by trusting adults or you, the teaching staff. Common digital tools that our students in Years 1 and 2 could be using include Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or Google Slides. Your students might be using Book Creator or Explain Everything if you have iPads at your school. The other key part of this content description is collaborating with peers, and this is guided by you, their teacher. Students need time to develop their group work skills, and any activities that encourage students to work in small groups or pairs, and also as a whole class, is excellent to help students developing these skills.
So taking a look at the content descriptions, there are two in this area. Number 4 refers to creating, locating, and communicating content. And 5 builds on that with the sharing and the collaborating. So if we take a look at the elaborations, we're talking about using, taking, storing, presenting, finding, creating. And so there are some examples there of students maybe retelling a story using a presentation type of software. They're doing photos and explaining and locating and uploading those. There are images that they can take and use as part of stories, and individual pieces of work contributing to group tasks. So students might contribute to a recipe, adding a photo, their favourite food, and develop a class recipe book. In our case, we might be developing something like a class pet book.
So for our project, there is a number of times when students are able to demonstrate this ability to use common digital tools to share content. So we had our students individually creating a pet profile, and then we want them to upload it to a shared folder so we can create a class set of pet profiles. Students are also encouraged to bring in a photo of their pet and record their pet's name and gender, and this is creating a class digital summary chart of their pets. The development of class sets of profiles and a class summary chart allows students to demonstrate those skills of collaboration and management throughout the project. They also worked collaboratively to decide what information they were going to include in their pet profile. So for example, they were thinking their pet name, the owner's name, address, the age, the gender of their pet. There are many skills or dispositions that are needed for students when they collaborate and manage projects. Remembering for students in years 1 and 2 that this is done with assistance by their teachers. As part of a digital technologies project, there are a number of digital literacy skills for our students to be learning. It's important to remember that to take time to teach mini lessons on these digital literacy skills. For example, if your students are creating a drawing using a presentation or drawing tool, then it's great to give them a lesson on how to draw shapes, how to align, how to arrange, colour, and group the objects. These mini skills are important to continually be improving your students' digital literacy. In years 3 and 4, you might ask students to use a PowerPoint, but by year 5 and 6, they're encouraged to select their own digital tools that is suitable for the purpose. So it's really important at this early year level that we are exposing them to a range of different digital tools. Now to talk about assessment of our students' work. During this project, there would be multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate their success. It's important that they have an opportunity for both formative assessment, so that's our assessment for learning, and assessment as learning, as well as summative assessment or assessment of learning, to allow you to make judgments of the student's success using evidence. Spending time at the start of your unit of work to clarify the what, the why, and the how of assessment is really important. Questions to consider include: how will you involve your students? What evidence will you collect? Formative assessment can include the questions and the classroom discussion prompts that we have shared with you. In the example of this project, it's questions such as who could help Mutt Dog and what happens to lost pets. Both formative and summative assessment methods include observations, photos and videos of the students' work, as well as their work samples.
So when planning your assessment in digital technologies, there's a number of aspects to consider. The first consideration is what elements of the achievement standard are you targeting? Each element or sentence relates to one or more content descriptions. How will you know that learning has taken place? On the screen, what you can see is an example for foundation. We have the foundation achievement statement there. And then in the blue rectangle, you can see the 3 elements of the achievement standard and then the content descriptions that match it. Might be a little bit hard to read, and you might need to pause and maybe look at a copy. This example here is found on the Australian Curriculum website. Taking a look at the year 1-2, you can see here that we have the achievement standard for the year 1-2 area. And again, we have in the black writing each of the elements relating to the content descriptions. I've just blown that up a little bit so it makes a bit more sense here. So when you're looking at students showing how simple digital solutions meet a need for the known user, we're looking at number 1 and number 3. And when I'm talking about content descriptions, I'm using the number at the end of the code. When we're looking at how they follow and describe basic algorithms involving the sequence of steps and branching, I'm referring here to the generating and designing area where we have a content description number 2. And then with assistance, when students access and use digital systems for a purpose, and that they use the basic features of common digital tools to create, locate, and share content and to collaborate following agreed behaviours, we're looking at the collaborating and managing substrand. And here we're looking at content descriptions 4 and 5. And it's important that we look at this element of the achievement standard so that we're addressing both content descriptions together rather than singularly. So again, I want to draw your attention back to those command verbs in assessment as well. Because from that statement, that achievement statement, I pulled out 4 really important elements: that we're showing simple digital solutions to meet a need, that we're accessing and using our digital systems for a purpose, that we follow and describe basic algorithms involving sequence of steps and branching, and that we're using these basic features of common digital tools to create, locate, and share content and to collaborate. So as I mentioned earlier, right back at the beginning with our command verbs, it's important to have an understanding of what each of these means. So what does it mean when we say we want our students to show or to describe? There are a number of glossaries available, and I would encourage you to have a look at those. There's some on the Victorian website, the NESA website, the International Baccalaureate, and just to get a good idea of what it is when we're assessing and what we're expecting our students to demonstrate. So let's go back to our Mutt Dog project. And when we're designing tasks for our students, giving them the opportunities to demonstrate their learning, there's a few questions we need to ask. For instance, is it necessary that we're assessing everything? Really hone in on what it is that you're looking at to assess. What evidence are you going to be looking for in the piece of work? Have they demonstrated all the skills required? Are they partway there? Look at those action verbs and zero in on 1 or 2 elements that they have mastered. Is what you've created achievable for all students? Where might you need to differentiate? Looking at their digital skills, how have they gone with taking their images? Are they able to place text and images within a slide correctly? What's their upload process like? Are they able to look after their work? Are they able to find their work, locate it? Have they accidentally deleted somebody else's work? All these things are really important skills to look for. And can one piece of work be used maybe to assess across learning areas? For instance, can you look at some areas of English while they're creating their pet profile? How does that fit in with the health and well-being? And what about science? Is it addressing some of the science content descriptions around the needs of animals as well? It's also a good idea to look at the entry points and their exit points. And what kind of feedback loop are you as a teacher providing?
We would now like to share with you a few more resources that are helpful when engaging in project work with your students. So a really exciting project that I was able to work on last year is the Design Thinking Mix-In. This includes a teacher workbook that has over 20 worksheets. It has a series of posters designed around the key design thinking concepts of empathy, feedback, and brainstorming. One of my favourite parts of this resource are the group role and the group description cards and the scenario cards. So both of these sets of cards were designed for teachers to use in their classrooms to help their students develop skills to work with their peers in small groups. The scenario cards discuss common group situations, such as one person in the group not contributing to group discussions or brainstorming, and so what should you do? The front of the card describes the scenario with an image, and the back of the card offers options for the people in the group. The cards could be used in small groups or as a whole class discussion, and are designed to prompt conversations between students about working together in groups. So this resource, including the workbook, the posters, cards, the worksheets, are all available to download, and I've included the link for you here.
Much of what we've spoken about today is really around a core concept of the digital technologies curriculum, which is around project management. And I'd like to draw to your attention this document that's been developed by the Digital Technologies in Focus team. And it's one of the resources on the Australian Curriculum website, and the link is on the screen for you to access it. This document goes through the planning and scheduling stages and explains the monitoring and controlling of a project, and then how to close it out. There's also teaching and learning strategies presented that are useful for students working through the design process. And there's also some ideas there as a teacher for you to go and look at some pedagogy around project management. And with that brings us to the end of our session, and indeed the series on Australian Curriculum version 9 updates for all of digital technologies. We hope that you were able to watch all 7 webinars and get a good sense of how to teach digital technologies using version 9 of the Australian curriculum.
As we wrap up our session, we'd like to thank you for joining us. And just in case you hadn't heard, wanted to let you know that resources at Grok are now completely free. So thanks to our partnership with WiseTech Global, any financial barriers to access and use our resources have been removed. And this is a 5-year partnership that we have with the aim of making learning digital technology skills available to every Australian student, teacher, parent, and adult learner for free. Grok Academy's mission is to educate all learners in transformative computing skills, knowledge, and dispositions. So you can scan this QR code, takes you straight to our platform where you can sign up for a teacher account if you don't have one already. Any questions, please contact us via this email, help@grokacademy.org. We would like to say thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed putting this webinar together and sharing our project ideas with you. And we hope to see you again, maybe at a conference, another professional learning session, or online.
Thanks, everyone.